December 7th, 2018. Howie summarizes cub petting for ad campaign. This is the cub petting project that we were working on with PPK and Michael Schillig, who has been our main contact there for many years. Background: growing public awareness of captive animal issues. In the last few years, we have increasingly seen that public awareness of captive exotic animal issues has been growing at an accelerating rate. It has become widespread enough to impact businesses that exploit animals by reducing attendance to a point where they had to either close down, like Ringling, or change their ways dramatically, like SeaWorld. For more on the accelerating trend, see an article I wrote for Encyclopedia Britannica, and then it gives the link. And you guys have heard that before because I read it to you. Cub petting drives the breeding. The vast majority of the breeding, particularly of tiger cubs, is to create a steady stream of cubs in order to charge the public to hold and pet them, take photos with them, even swim with them. The cubs are only used for a few months, so steady supply is needed. This cub petting trade is a horribly abusive treatment of these animals because cubs are ripped from their mothers at birth to make them more manageable, because if they are left with the mothers for even a month, they become the equivalent of feral cats and not useful. This separation at birth is a torment to any mammal mother and offspring. The cubs are physically punished in order to diminish their natural tendencies to play roughly, which nature builds in as part of their training to become successful tigers in the wild. The cubs are deprived of the mother's milk that has the immune qualities that bottle formula cannot duplicate. The cubs' immune systems are further impaired by sleep deprivation, because the cubs, who normally would sleep the largest part of the day, are kept awake as long as there are customers willing to pay. They are often awakened from sleep in order to be used for petting. These tiny cubs with weakened immune systems are then exposed to being handled by hundreds of people who may be carrying disease either themselves or from pets at home. The cubs with raging diarrhea and ringworm have continued to be used by the cub petting operations. There is no tracking how many cubs die in the process. There is no tracking of how many that survive are raised until big enough to slaughter and supply the illegal trade in their parts, because there is no tracking of what these few breeders do with the cubs once they are too big to pet. The ones that can be tracked end up with miserable lives, and the females being unhealthily bred constantly instead of the natural 2 to 3 year cycle that occurs in nature, because it takes that long for the mother to teach the cubs to hunt and for the cubs to reach sufficient maturity to be on their own. There are about half a dozen significant cub petting breeders in the country. Some are in relatively small markets, at least one in the larger Southeast Florida market. However, their customers come from all over the country, particularly if they are on vacation destination areas. The rest of the country's zoos operate without cub petting. Our goal is not to put any zoo out of business. Our goal would be to create such awareness of the misery caused by cub petting that people would A, not patronize it, and B, call out those few zoos who do it to a point where the reduced revenue and negative publicity would cause the zoos to change their ways and join the vast majority of zoos who are successful without doing cub petting. Big Cat Rescue's financial position. We have had a series of good years that has allowed us to, 1, fully fund the pension liability that ensures we can care for the cats to the end of their lives if another 9/11 or other event caused donations and visitors to stop, and 2, we have made the most of major capital improvements. We have made most of the major capital improvements needed on the sanctuary property. This puts us in a position where, if we thought we could have a meaningful impact on public awareness of cub petting that would cause people not to patronize it, we could spend as much as $1 million over the course of a year. Digital marketing. I asked Liz that we consider all kinds of traditional media, not just digital, and express some reservations about digital based on our one experience. The cub petting video PPK produced and geofenced to the capital area was off the charts successful in terms of 70+% of people who viewed it and watching it to the end, versus the norm of only a few percent. But despite the geofencing and our limited questioning of congressional aides, none had seen it, so it did not accomplish its primary purpose. Questions for PPK. The question I discussed with Liz is whether with this kind of budget we could have a meaningful impact, i.e. build awareness to a point where patronage dropped, and if so, how. Below are the bullet points I took away from our half-hour conversation, taking notes as fast as I could while we talked, so they may not be accurate. The budget is too small to have a national impact. Newspaper is an older demographic. Circus is a much more broadly known issue. If I understand correctly, Liz felt many of the people do not know there is cub petting, so it may be harder to educate them. My subsequent thought, we do get a lot of calls at the sanctuary from people asking if we have cubs to pet. Even if the people have not heard of it, it is a simple concept captured in 2 words pretty vividly. And in the case of the circus, this is a practice that was widely accepted by our society for over 100 years, so the advocates had to change people's thinking. Therefore, I might argue that people having not heard of cub petting gives us the benefit of no preconceived bias to overcome. Also, tiger selfies have been pretty broadly in the news and social media, with Tinder instituting a policy against them, so I'm not sure there is as much a lack of awareness as Liz seemed to think, if I understood her correctly. Should strongly consider if digital and social media. I am not sure there is a difference unless digital is referring to having it on a website that we send people to. With our budget, we could do enough to have an impact in a smaller market, like Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, by geofencing and filtering. If it worked in one market, we could replicate it in time over others. Perhaps not use banner ads like we did in DC because it requires people seeing them 8 to 9 times before they click. Use more interruptive digital techniques that send people to a web page. Our current page is bigcatrescue.org/cubs. It is very thorough, but very long. So I am thinking we need a video at the top that concisely and compellingly covers it. Because people may not want to see any vivid mistreatment of cubs, and we have a limited undercover video to show, Carole came up with the idea that for this page, what we push on Facebook, we might want to use animation to tell this story. She is experimenting with that. Not sure if I got this right, but I think she said that with Facebook ads, we could filter for people who had done Google searches on terms like tiger cub petting or cub petting. So we could capture people in Myrtle Beach who had searched for cub petting before coming. However, if people coming on vacation bought tickets in advance, it would be too late. Subsequently, it occurred to me if our goal is to catch people who search on cub petting and get them to a website, we could do that by pouring money into keywords so that our website comes up when they search. But when I do that search, the top results already are people like us opposing cub petting. Despite this, the cub petting operations still thrive. Liz talked about using Facebook to create material that people would want to repost, gaining exponentially more unpaid views, and having people who get it influence others. So the alternative to Google ads, based on the searches, would be boosting these posts, hoping to reach a lot of people that will repost them to others. Note, in contrast to Carole, I have limited understanding of Facebook marketing, so some of my notes above may reflect that. And I don't know if I talk about this more later, but we spent a fortune on doing exactly what he proposed here, and geofencing videos and messages to try and stop cub petting. And unfortunately, when COVID hit, we had to stop all of those campaigns because we weren't sure we'd be able to feed the cats. But it was very successful during that period of time from December of 2018 up until March of 2020. If you're enjoying my diary, please like, share, and subscribe. You can find other ways to connect to me over at bigcatrescue.org/Carole.Baskin.